Welcome everybody. We see a few more people who are trying to get in. So we'll go ahead and give them a minute before we get started here. Try to get everybody settled. Oh, so just a reminder for those who are already here and with us, thank you very much. Just to let you know that we do have the chat box open here. You guys, some of you guys are already chatting with us in there, but go ahead and ask your questions there. We don't have the capability of you guys being able to talk to us, and we want to be able to keep the flow of this moving pretty smoothly. So that's the reason why. But if you guys ask your questions there, we'll go ahead and answer the questions there. Any questions that you guys ask as a group, like more than one person asks those questions, we will go ahead and address those as a group here. And we'll go ahead and answer that question live on the webinar. All right, so I see everybody's on already. So once again, welcome everyone. My name's Chris. I'm the owner of 915 Logistics. Today we're going to be talking about Clearinghouse. Just a reminder, you guys, for those who weren't here earlier, sorry, I got a frog in my throat there. But for those who weren't here a second ago, please remember that we do have the chat function here. The audio and microphones are only one way, so we're doing that to keep time. We know everybody's busy, and we don't want to keep everybody from doing other tasks. So that's the reason why we have it set up the way we do. If you guys ask, more than one person asks the same question in the chat box, we will go ahead and address it here as a group. We'll just answer it through the audio in the webinar here. Okay. So so I'm gonna go ahead and let Lydia introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Lydia, and I just wanted to thank you guys for joining, and also to thank those that shared the post and you got the coupon. And just please be aware, for those of you that didn't share, that you have opportunities to share the next webinar that we'll have, the ad, and you'll also receive that $5 coupon.
And the podcast. And don't forget the podcast.
Yeah, don't forget the podcast.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so those who already have our safety services already know. You guys are already in the know. We do have a safety portal where you guys can request documents, request work to be done. We could even, you guys know there's a lot more to the safety portal than it's just a housing place. But for those who are in the webinar today, who do not have our safety services, you guys do have access to the safety portal, okay? However, because you're not safety clients of ours, you may only be able to see the documents or submit work requests. You guys don't have any work that's pending, so you won't be able to see the status of those work items, okay? However, the password for it is going to be 915, okay? That is the default password. You're going to use the email that you signed up for the webinar today. Now, just so you guys know, I know that we also forgot to mention it a second ago, but we are also going to be recording this, and we are going to be putting this as a video inside of the safety portal. Just give us about maybe 2.5 weeks or so, and then this video will be there, so you could always go back and reference our talking points, okay? That way you guys could hear it straight from us, and you don't have to worry about any interpretations. Now, we are going to be talking about some topics here in regards to the clearinghouse. This is going to be our agenda. These are going to be the topics. One of them is going to be the overview of the clearinghouse. The second is going to be the registration and how to register for the clearinghouse, how to conduct queries and get query consents, and basically the requirements in the clearinghouse when it comes to those items. The violations, common issues and frequently asked questions, along with clearinghouse rules. Okay, those are going to be the 6 main topics that we're going to talk about today. All right, so today let's begin with the explanation of the clearinghouse and the clearinghouse rules, and Lydia is pretty much going to take it away from here.
Okay, so what is Clearinghouse? The Clearinghouse is a secure online database that gives employers, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is FMCSA, state driver licensing agencies, SDLAs, and state law enforcement personnel real-time information about commercial driver's license, which is CDL, and commercial learner's permit, CLP holders, drug and alcohol program violations. An act of Congress directed the Secretary of Transportation to establish the Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse enables employers to identify drivers who commit a drug and alcohol program violation while working for one employer, but who fail to subsequently inform another employer as required by current regulations. The Clearinghouse improves highway safety, provides FMCSA and employers the necessary tools to identify drivers who are prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle, CMV, based on the U.S. Department of Transportation, DOT, drug and alcohol program violations, and ensure that such drivers receive the required evaluation and treatment before operating a CMV on public roads. The Clearinghouse rule requires FMCSA regulated employers, medical review officers, which are MROs, substance abuse professionals, SAPs or SAPs, consortium and third-party administrators, CTPAs, and other agents to report to the Clearinghouse information related to the violation of drug and alcohol regulations in 49 Code of Federal Regulations Part 40 and 382 by current and prospective employees. The Clearinghouse also requires the following. Employers are required to query the Clearinghouse for current and prospective employees' drug and alcohol violations before permitting those employees to operate a CMV on public roads. Also, employers are required to annually query the Clearinghouse for each driver they currently employ.
All right, so thank you, Lydia. That was a really good overview. Just to kind of recap on that, there are basically 2 rules, okay? The first rule that we're going to talk about is the mandated by Congress. This is the MAP 21, Section 32402. This was published in December 5th, 2016. This does establish the requirements for the clearinghouse and will be implemented, or has already been implemented, I should say, on January 6, 2020. Okay. Now, you guys, here is the link where you guys can actually read the final rule for the clearinghouse. But all of what Lydia was just explaining to you guys is basically in this clearinghouse final rule right here. Okay, now there are some modifications that are coming in this year for the future, but we're going to go ahead and talk about those later. Go ahead, Lydia. Let's go ahead and cover this next one.
Okay, so which drivers are subject to the Clearinghouse rule? All CDL drivers who operate CMVs on public roads and their employers and service agents. This includes, but is not limited to, interstate and intrastate motor carriers, including passenger carriers, school bus drivers, construction equipment operators, limousine drivers, municipal vehicle drivers like waste management vehicles, federal and other organizations that employ drivers subject to FMCSA drug and alcohol testing regulations, like the Department of Defense, municipalities, and school districts. Government entities are not required to obtain a US DOT number under 49 CFR Part 390. However, they are subject to the Controlled Substance and Alcohol Testing Regulations in 49 CFR Part 382.
Okay, so who is required to use the clearinghouse? So drivers who hold a commercial driver's license, a CDL or a CDLP is what I call them, which is a commercial learner's permit or a CLP. Employers of CDL drivers who operate a CMV or a commercial motor vehicle. A consortium, a third-party administrators such as ourselves. We are not a consortium here, however, we are a third-party administrator, and we do have our own clearinghouse. MROs, which is a medical review officer, a SAP, which is a substance abuse professional, and a state driver's license agencies, SDLAs, okay? Now these are going to be some of the common definitions and terms that you guys are going to be hearing throughout this presentation here in this webinar to you guys, okay? Now, when we're talking about third-party administrators, that could be a safety company, that could be any kind of third-party reference that you guys have to manage your clearinghouse, okay? When we're talking about employees, that is completely different. If you have an assistant, there is a different role for that, and we're going to cover that a little bit later, okay? So, what do I need to register for the clearinghouse, okay? So for employers and owner-operators, a DOT issued number, you do need to have a DOT number. You do need to have a portal account for the FMCSA, but now, just remember, this is preferred, but is not required, and we're going to go ahead and show you a little bit more about that later. A CDL owner-operator, a consortium or as third-party administrators such as ourselves. You also need to have an email, okay? We do live in today's age where this is the preferred method, along with a cell phone, which is also a preferred method for your secure login, okay? Now, CDL drivers, you do need to have a valid CDL. You do need to have an email address, once again, and a cell phone, once again, for the preferred method for secure login. Now, the FMCSA Commercial Driver's License Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, okay? Now, how the process for this works is the clearinghouse will associate a violation with a driver's CDL information and will be recorded in the database even if the driver has not been registered, okay? Now, with the record is employers and medical review officers report the violation information to the clearinghouse, positive tests, refusal to test, and actual knowledge. It is retained in the secure database. And then after you get consent for the query, you can go ahead and review those violations if any are there. Now, employers and CTPAs query the clearinghouse for violation information with driver consent. The FMCSA uses data for enforcement purposes, okay? Drivers can access their own information as well, okay? And so, what is the purpose of the clearinghouse? The reason why this was put out into the public is, one, it creates more insight to employers for compliance with drug and alcohol testing rules. By giving you real-time access to reported violations information for select registered users. This also makes it easier for employers to meet their pre-employment investigation and reporting obligations as it is set forth in the FMCSA and the FMCSR. Now, this does make it more difficult for drivers to conceal their drug and alcohol violations from their employers. All of this translates into a safer roadway by keeping those who do not need to be driving off of the road.
Okay, so Clearinghouse conducts monthly summary reports on new registrations, how many queries are conducted, how many violations are reported, and different substances that are reported on drug violations, like the chart here on the right. So Clearinghouse will have this monthly, and
Oh, so you guys, I see a lot of the same questions here for the numbers. Like Lydia was saying, that this is published monthly. Okay, so a lot of the questions that are coming up is why is it in 2020 there were 29,000, or I'm sorry, 53,000 514 in all substances, and then a big jump of 55,223, and then 17,306 for 2022. Well, a simple fact is that this is the current year, right? So we don't have a complete year to date for 2022. Okay. So once again, this is a monthly report that they put out to show you what kind of tests are being conducted and what kind of drugs and alcohol that they are seeing in their testing. Now, I do want to point out that there was a pretty significant, about a 2,000, more or less, a más o menos, a 2,000 number of substance violations between 2020 and 2021. Now, the reason why that happened is because it was implemented, and after implementation, it did take a while for people to get on board with the Drug and Alcohol Administration's, I'm sorry, the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse regulations. So it did take them a little bit longer to start seeing an increase. Okay. It did take them almost a whole year. So 2021, you did see a significant jump. And if you were to calculate these numbers correctly, this chart, I believe, is from last month. So that would put it on track to pretty much meet. If we were to look at these numbers successfully here for this year, we are successfully going to meet 55 to 53,000 projected for this year. So it's not so much as a decrease as a more of a staying steady. Now, what that means is basically what we were talking about a couple of slides ago. The purpose of this is so that we can eliminate unsafe drivers from being on the road. So just think about it that way. We have 55,000 drivers out there on the road who do not need to be out on the road, and who are either rehabilitated or that have been removed from their safety sensitive functions of driving to begin with. So I hope that answers your guys' questions. I see a lot of okays on the screen, so I think we're gonna kind of move on. Yeah, hold on. Technical difficulties. If we can move on, that would be great. Ah, there we go. Okay. So, here is an overview of the actions that a driver is responsible for completing the clearinghouse. Okay. Now, they do need to be registered. They do need to have an ad of accurate information of their CDL, and they need to verify their CDL. They need to view any violations, history, respond to any query consent requests, and designate a SAP, a substance abuse professional. Okay. Now, once the driver has registered, they're going to get a consent. Okay. They do need to give consent. Okay. Now, when they give consent, they need to respond to consent requests for full queries from a potential or current employer. Note that all pre-employment queries are full queries, and we're going to get a little bit more information about that to you guys here in a minute. This does include positive tests, test refusals, and actual knowledge, okay? Now, another part of that is they do need, once again, to designate a SAP if needed to record any return to duty information, which is RTD. Now, failure to provide consent for a request for a full query will result in the driver from being prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions, which include operating a commercial motor vehicle for that employer in accordance with 49 CFR 382.703 section C. Okay, so for student drivers, it's more or less the same process. You do need to have a registration period where you need to register yourself. They need to be enrolled in an independent trucking school and register as a student driver. They need to give consent, conduct pre-employment queries on yourself, okay? And you must be completed, all this must be completed before your training on public roads, okay? Now, along with that, you do need to designate a CTPA that is officially required. A CTPA must report violations and RTD information. Student drivers may designate a CTPA to conduct queries or conduct their own. Okay. Now this is going to be an area where a lot of people are going to fail out on the road as a student driver because they don't realize that they are required to be part of this and that they do need to conduct a query on themselves. Okay. So that's where having this kind of training and this information really does become useful. Okay, so next we will talk about what actions the employers are responsible for in completing the clearinghouse. Now, employers will register and link their clearinghouse portal account. If you do not have a portal account at this moment, you can still continue registering for the clearinghouse, but you will still need to link your portal account later on. And when we're talking about portal account, we're talking about the FMCSA portal account. They will also report CDL driver drug and alcohol program information, violations including positive tests, test of refusals, and actual knowledge. Employers must also do so, conduct a pre-employment and annual queries to check the driver is prohibited from driving a CMV. A driver consent is required before a query can be conducted. Now, employers can also designate a consortium third-party administrator if desired. Now, they need to authorize the actions the CPTA will complete on their behalf. We'll show you more on that here when we get to the CTPA section. A CTPA may be designated during the registration or after the employer has completed registration. Okay. Yeah, here we go with the technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. So now let's talk about the owner-operator requirements. Now, if you are an owner-operator, you will register as an employer and indicate that you are an owner-operator during the registration. You will link your clearinghouse with your portal account to your clearinghouse, okay? Now you can also add and verify your CDL number and information. Now owner-operators must conduct a pre-employment and annual queries to check if a driver is prohibited from operating a CMV. A driver consent is required before a query can be conducted, period. Okay. Now owner-operators must designate at least one consortium third-party administrator to report violations in RTD information. Now the CTPA may be designated to conduct queries on your behalf, and a CTPA may be designated during the registration or after you have completed your registration, but you cannot complete any actions in the clearinghouse until you have designated at least one CTPA. And okay, so here is an overview of the actions that an MRO and a SAP are supposed to be taking. Now, an MRO, remember you guys, is a medical review officer, and a SAP is a substance abuse professional. Now, these are the responsibilities that they must complete in the clearinghouse. An MRO must register and self-certify that they meet all MRO qualifications per Part 4121. They also must report positive, adulterated, and substituted drug test and drug test refusals per Part 4191. Now, SAPS, which is a substance abuse professional, must register and self-certify that they meet all the SAP qualifications per Part 4281. And the SAP will also enter certain information about the driver's return to duty status process, including the date of the initial SAP assessment and the date the SAP determines that the driver is eligible for a return to duty test. Now, before you can enter the RTD information about your driver, you will need to approve the driver's request for, approve their request in the clearinghouse to become their designated SAP. Okay. And more technical.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the login.gov for drivers, owner-operators, and employers. Oops. Some more difficulties. Okay, so we're going to create a login.gov account first. Accessing the clearinghouse requires the creation of a login.gov account, which is a shared service that offers secure online access to participating government systems such as the clearinghouse. All right, on the login.gov sign-in screen, you will go ahead and click to create an account. If you've already got a login.gov account, you will just go ahead and enter your email address, password on the screen and click sign in, and then you'll just go to step 9. But for those of you that don't have a login.gov, just keep listening. All right, so here you will enter your email address and click submit. This is the email address that the clearinghouse will use to send you notifications about your account, and this email address will also be used to identify you in the clearinghouse. Okay, so you will check your email and open from the no reply at login.gov with the subject line confirm your email. You will click confirm email address or just copy and paste the link into the browser. Okay, from here you'll create a password. This password must be at least 12 characters long. If the password you enter is not strong enough, you will not be able to continue. So you'll create a strong password and click continue. All right, here you will select an option to secure your account. Login.gov requires the completion of a user verification process to ensure the proper person is using those credentials. You will need to provide a way for login.gov to send you a one-time security code, and we recommend choosing the phone text message SMS option. You shouldn't use the backup codes as your primary authentication method unless one of the other methods aren't available to you. If you don't have a cell phone, you can still access the clearinghouse, but you could lose your backup codes. So we recommend just using the phone security option.
So somebody, actually a couple of you guys are asking about that email a couple of slides ago. And I know some of you probably already know this, but check your spam folders. If you don't see it in the inbox, you're going to have to go check your spam folder. And you would just type in login.gov in your search bar, and that's how you would be able to find it. Okay? All right. Sorry, Lydia.
Thank you. Okay, so once you get the security code, you will go ahead and enter it on the screen and click submit. Alright, so you have created your login.gov account. Go ahead, click agree and continue to return to the Clearinghouse website, and from there we'll go ahead and complete our Clearinghouse registration. Okay, and real quick, if you need to change your email address and your authentication method for the login.gov, go ahead and just log back in to login.gov, and you'll scroll down to where you can see your login information, and you can add another number, another email, or edit the email or number for your two-factor authentication method. So just in case, have a backup for your backup. You can have two numbers. All right, we're going to talk about Clearinghouse registration for drivers. All right, so after you've created your login.gov account, we can go ahead and create the Clearinghouse. You will first select your role, and your role will be driver. And after selecting your role, you will go ahead and do the little check marks for I will respond to query consents, and I will review my electronic clearinghouse record, and you will click register as driver. All right, so here you will enter your contact information. All fields are required unless otherwise noted. Your email address will be pre-filled because that's the one you used for your login.gov. Okay. You will then choose your preferred contact method and click next. Please choose email instead of US mail. If you select US mail, you will see a message asking you to confirm the selection because the notifications sent will include time-sensitive requests for your actions needed to take in the clearinghouse. Selecting US mail could result in delays in these notifications, which may impact your eligibility to perform safety-sensitive functions. So please just choose change to email. All right, here you will enter your current commercial driver's license or commercial learner's permit information. Then you will click verify. The clearinghouse will then verify that information against information in the commercial driver's license information system.
SIDLIS.
The SIDLIS? SIDLIS. Then after verifying, it will take you to the terms and conditions. Here, go ahead and just review the terms. It looks like a lot, but go ahead and review them. We have a special note on here. Sorry, one second.
So the special note here is if you guys read through these terms and conditions, okay, and you have a third-party administrator as your safety company, we highly suggest that you remember that this is a government system, okay? So when it comes with government systems, you know, there come laws, and especially with breaking terms and conditions. Now, do not, under any circumstances, give out your password to your portal as a driver or as an employer or as an owner or operator. You guys, it's basically you committing fraud on a government system, and it actually says it here inside of it that you know, that you will comply with these rules and regulations, and that you will not give out your password. Failure to do so, we actually looked it up on some of these regulations. It includes a fine of up to, what was it, 500,000?
Yeah.
Was it 500,000? Yeah, 500,000, and up to a year in jail, a federal imprisonment. So, you know, we here at 915, we always discourage people from breaking the law. You know, so we highly encourage you guys to read the terms and conditions. Do not give out your password. Do not share your password. And yeah, that was my special note. So.
Thank you. And then for that, that's why we were talking about CTPAs earlier, third-party administrators. So if you do need help, with your clearinghouse. That's why clearinghouse gives you the option to have assistants or administrators. So again, yeah, do not share your password. All right, so now we're going to talk about the clearinghouse registration for owner operators and employers. All right, so again, after creating your login.gov account, you can now register for clearinghouse. So here you will go ahead and select your role. For owner operators, you will select employer, and then you will register as an employer and a driver. For employers only, you will select employer and then register as employer. Okay, the path you take to register as an employer will depend on whether or not you have an FMCSA portal account. If your company has a USDOT number, you should have a portal account. If you do not have one or don't know if you have one, visit the link here on the screen and request an account. A portal account is given out to an individual person at a company. It is not a shared account used by multiple users at a company. If your company has a DOT number, each employee who uses the clearinghouse for your company should have their own portal account and their own login.gov account to access the clearinghouse. Once you have a portal account, you will need to be sure your portal account has the correct user roles before you register for the clearinghouse. The user roles are summarized here on the screen. Be sure to request the user role that has the permissions you'll need in the clearinghouse. Okay, you can continue without an FMCSA portal, but you will have to link your portal at some point. Selecting that you do not have an FMCSA portal, you will have to manually add your company's information. If you do have an FMCSA portal account, it will automatically fill that information in for you. Okay, so to request a clearinghouse user role in the portal, you will log in to your FMCSA portal. You will then go under Account Management and select My Profile. You will select the portal roles under or the USD DOT number tab. In the USDOT number list, you will select the number you want to link with your clearinghouse account. Please note that you must request a clearinghouse user role for each USDOT number you need to link with the clearinghouse, and this is for if you have multiple DOTs. If not, just use the one that's there. Step 4, under available roles, you will select clearinghouse user role with the permissions, and you will need to click add role to add in your requested roles. Employers and assistants can report driver, drug, and alcohol program violation information, return to duty tests, and send queries. Employers can also designate an assistant or CTPA and indicate whether or not a motor carrier is an owner operator. You will choose that option. Step 5, under reason for request, enter the reason you need this user role. So for example, you'll put enter drug and alcohol program violation information and query driver records. And step 6, you will go ahead and update your profile. When your company official approves the request, it will appear under requested roles with approved status. If you are your company official, the request will just approve automatically. Okay, so after logging in with your portal account, you will have to review the contact information. Your information has been pulled from the portal, and it cannot be updated in the clearinghouse, only through your portal. If you need to make any changes, go ahead and make changes before moving forward. All right. If you have more than one DOT, you need to select the company from the drop-down list of which one you are going to be registering for. Okay, you will then review the company information. Again, the information has been pulled. Bless you. Sorry. Oh, you got a lot of bless yous here in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
So here again, you'll review the company that you selected if you have more than one DOT. You will review the information, and you will need to indicate whether you are an owner-operator. So after reviewing the name, the USDOT company email, along with the addresses, you will go ahead and either select yes, I am an owner-operator, or no, I am not an owner-operator. Okay, and step 5, designating CTPAs. Employer administrators will be prompted to designate a consortium or third-party administrator during the registration process. A CTPA manages all or part of an employer's DOT drug and alcohol testing program and performs tasks as agreed to by the employer and assist in implementing the drug and alcohol testing program and to help keep employer compliant with DOT FMCSA drug and alcohol testing rules and regulations. The Clearinghouse is not a tool for finding a CTPA. If you need to find a CTPA, you can just search online for consortium or third-party administrators. You should have an agreement with your CTPA outside the Clearinghouse before designating them inside the Clearinghouse. And also, CTPAs should not accept a designation request from an employer that they do not recognize. Okay. So CTPAs must be registered in the Clearinghouse before they can be designated. Employers must select the actions a CTPA may take on their behalf. Owner-operators must designate at least one CTPA to complete the following, which is reporting violations and reporting return to duty information.
Okay, so when you're designating your CTPA, you want to authorize what they can do, such as report violations, report RTD information, or conduct queries. Now, in this example that we've shown here, when it asks you who is your CTPA and you type in Harlow, it'll ask you Harlow Consortium, and then you would click Designate. Now, that being said, when we're talking about authorizing roles and authorizing what they can do, you see here in this example that there are two CTPAs. One is a consortium, and the other one might be a third-party administrator, where the third-party administrator reports the violations, which is the XYZ Corp, reports the violations and reports RTD information. However, the consortium conducts the queries. Okay. Now, in this example, I'm just showing you, this is something that we pulled off of Google, was this slide, and or I'm sorry, this picture. Now, traditionally, what you would want to do is have your consortium report your violations and your RTD information, and not have them conduct queries. Now, your third-party administrator would also report violations, report RTD information, and conduct queries. Now, obviously, this is where Lydia was talking about having an agreement with your third-party administrator and your consortium before you designate them. And the reason being is because you want to have that clear line of communication of what their roles are going to be during their clearinghouse, during their designated time as your CTPA. Okay, so once you have completed your registration, you have the option to invite one or more clearinghouse assistants using this feature. Okay. Once you've gotten done with that is basically what I mean. Once you've done your CTPA designation, the assistant must use the link in the email invitation to begin their clearinghouse registration. This will link the assistant's clearinghouse account to your organization, allowing multiple users to access the clearinghouse on your organization's behalf, ensuring uninterrupted access to the clearinghouse due to staff transitions, and etc., etc. Now, please note, for my employers, I think we only have one major employer here. Inviting an assistant does not require if your company has a DOT number. Your users should go to the Clearinghouse website and register their user ID and password, which will allow them to create the Clearinghouse to recognize the Clearinghouse user role in each user's portal account. Now, I know I kind of fumbled on my words there, but basically they need to create a Clearinghouse portal account, and it must be linked to your Clearinghouse portal ID, okay? Now, if your organization will have more than one administrator, all administrators should go through the Clearinghouse website and begin the registration process immediately, and same thing with your assistants.
Okay, so after designating your CTPA, you will then go ahead and enter in your CDL information. You will then click verify, and Clearinghouse will go ahead and re-verify that information. And once Clearinghouse has re-verified your information, you will see that green check mark and it'll say success, that we have verified your CDL information. You will then click next and agree to the terms and conditions, and from here your registration is complete. For employers, you will not see the step 6, the CDL information. You will just automatically go to the terms and conditions section.
All right, so now let's take a closer look at the requirements for conducting queries and obtaining driver consent, okay? So a query is a check of the Clearinghouse to ensure a CDL driver is not prohibited from performing safety sensitive functions, such as operating a CMV. Now, due to a drug and alcohol program violation, all queries require driver consent, okay? Now, when we're talking about the purpose of queries, a pre-employment query is required for all newly hired CDL drivers. Now, this is in effect until January 5th, 2023. A manual check is still going to be required for the prior 3 years, okay? Now, annual queries are going to be follows a rolling 12-month calendar. Example, if Jay Smith was hired on December 1st, you're not required to query Jay Smith until December 1st of the following year. Now, the different types of consent. Given the different type of query, there are different requirements for the driver consents. Now, please note that if a driver refuses consent for any query whatsoever, that driver cannot perform safety sensitive functions for that employer until they have completed the query. This is a major violation. Just throwing that out there, you're running a huge risk if they are not completed with their query, and you are running a huge risk if they are prohibited, okay? Now, for annual queries, these are limited queries, okay? So when you're in there, you're going to see the term limited and full query. Limited queries are annuals. Now this does, you can use a general consent form. This is done outside of the Clearinghouse. Now you can have an electronic or a wet signature one time, or have that consent be unlimited. Now, limited consent must specify the time range. So if your consent is only for 6 months, you need to have it stated in your consent. Now, this is typically done during your pre-employment process or during your orientation processes. This is where you would want to have this consent signed. This is where we actually have them consent signed, is during their packet signing during orientation. Now, for pre-employment queries, this is going to be a full query. Now, specific consent must be provided electronically within the clearinghouse, okay? Now, this is required for each full query of an individual driver, okay? So please, once again, if a driver refuses consent for any query, the query cannot be conducted and the driver is prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions for that employer.
Oh, Chris, we have a couple of questions. So a couple people are asking, where do they get the general consent for the annual?
Oh, so that's actually a great question, Lydia. Thank you. So the general consent form, there is a sample form that you can download from the clearinghouse. We're also going to provide you guys in our white packet, our white paper packet that we're going to email to you guys after the webinar here. We just wanted to wait for everyone to be here so that way we have a full list and we're not trying to play catch up. So you're going to get the sample general consent form that we use here. We just replace the name of the company. That's all we do, is where it says insert company name here. That's where you're going to just insert your company name or your DOT number. However you want to be identified in your paperwork is completely up to you. So oh, did that answer everybody's question?
Yeah, everyone give some thumbs up here.
Some thumbs up? Oh, okay, cool. So here are some sample query results for a limited query, okay? If a limited query determined that there is no violation information in the driver's clearinghouse record, the result will show driver not prohibited in green, okay? Now, if the information is related to a drug and alcohol program violation is presented in the driver's clearinghouse record, the notice appears stating full query needed, okay? That's going to be in the exclamation point in the yellow here. Now note that the records found is not notification that the queried driver is prohibited from performing the safety sensitive functions. This could be information related to the closed RTD process, meaning the driver could still be eligible to operate a CMV. However, a full query is going to be needed in that particular case to determine whether or not a driver is still eligible to drive. Now, we'll run through the results of a full query here shortly, but just please keep in mind, just because you see that yellow exclamation point, that may not mean that they are prohibited from driving. Okay, so when a driver, if a full query is needed, okay, a consent request will be sent to that driver, and you can see an example of what that looks like in the driver's clearinghouse account on this screen. Now, the driver will respond to the query consent. The driver must be registered in the clearinghouse to provide consent for pre-employment and full queries. We already covered that. Now, employers must obtain a driver's consent before querying the driver's violation information. In this particular instance, it is going to be electronic in the clearinghouse. And again, failure to provide consent for such a request will result in the driver from being prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions, including operating a CMV for that employer in accordance with 49 CFR 382.703, Section C. Okay, just please, you guys, do not let your drivers out on the road until this is done.
Alright, so now let's discuss the results of a full query. Once an employer receives a notification email that the driver has responded to the consent request, the employer will then log into the clearinghouse and view their queries conducted page. That provides an overview of each query. Depending on the notification settings, the employer may also receive a notification within the clearinghouse. An employer can click on View Query Details to view the detail of the query. Drivers can also log in to view the details of their own query and any other information on their own driver record. We'll talk more about this shortly. A pending query will display a yellow band until a driver has provided consent, a red band, like the one you see on the screen, will I'm sorry, I'm looking at a couple of chats here. No, we're going to describe more of the colors here. So the red band that we see right here shows that the driver is prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions at the time of the query. After 24 hours, a limited result returning, if a driver has not provided consent, it will turn red.
So on this page here, this is just an example of the violation. So after you click query details, you would be able to open up that the detailed information on here, and you would be able to see exactly what the violation was for, what kind of test it was, you know where the violation occurred, whether it was RTD, test refusal, things of that nature. Okay, so this will give you more of an idea of the kind of prohibition that you're looking at.
Alright, so again, the red bar, you will see that the query result is the driver is prohibited, the query status has been completed, and your driver cannot operate on the road. So when you see these, do not let them on the road. When you see a yellow band, the query result is driver is not prohibited. The query status is a specific consent is required. So what this means is the driver has not yet accepted the consent, and the driver will need to register for the clearinghouse and accept the consent in order to fully see if the driver is eligible to drive on the road. So just because it says driver not prohibited doesn't mean that they're good to go. Alright, so if you see like a white bar or just no color, and the query result says driver not prohibited, the query status says completed, this means that your driver is eligible to drive on the road. Alright, so this is the driver's view of their own violation information. Here, if you believe the violation information has been inaccurately recorded, you can request a data review, which will go on more detail a little bit later. Here, from your violation history, you can click View Violation Details and see the full information that was shared with your employer who conducted the full query.
All right, so let's take a closer look at reporting violation information in the clearinghouse. So here are the violations that an employer or the designated CTPAs are required to report in the clearinghouse. Now, one of them is an alcohol confirmation test with a concentration of 0.04% or higher. A refusal to test alcohol and a refusal to test drugs, not requiring a determination by the MRO. Now these are all specified in the 49 CFR Part 40 261 and Part 4191. Now, actual knowledge, and we're gonna talk about this here in a minute. But actual knowledge is defined in 49 CFR 382.107 that a driver has used alcohol on duty and used alcohol within 4 hours of coming on duty, or used alcohol prior to a post-accident testing, or has used controlled substances in any of those scenarios. Negative RTD, or a return to duty test results. This is also applicable for drug and alcohol. And completion of follow-up testing. So you are required to report any negative RTDs and the completion of your follow-up testing. Now remember, employers, you do have 3 business days to conduct a business, to conduct these kinds of reports. Now we wanted to make sure that everyone understands what it does, what does and does not qualify as actual knowledge, okay? Because this can be kind of confusing for people, okay? To be recorded in the clearinghouse, actual knowledge must be based on one of the following. An employer's direct observation of an employee, information provided by the driver's previous employers, meaning your previous employment verification checks, that can count as actual knowledge. A traffic citation for driving a CMV while underneath the influence of drug and alcohol controlled substance. An employer's admission of drug and alcohol or substance use, sorry, I got tongue-tied there, except as provided in section, 383.21 of the FMCSRs. Now, a verified positive drug test does not qualify as actual knowledge. That is actual positive testing. So that is not actual knowledge, okay? It's a whole different category. Now, when reporting actual knowledge, an employer must upload supporting documentation. You can't just go in there and say, oh yes, I had drug observation, or whatever your reasoning is. You need to be able to document your interaction here. Now, note that employers should not report positive drug tests as actual knowledge. That is something that your consortium is responsible for. Okay. Now, what information is the MRO or the SAP required to report? Now, your MRO is required to verify positive test, tampered or substituted drug test. Refusal to test of drug determined by the MRO specified in 49 CFR Part 40.191, and changes to any verified drug test by 49 CFR Part 40. Okay. Now the MRO with the positive drug test and the positive tampered or substituted drug test has 2 business days within making the determination of a verification of a DOT approved drug test, with changes to a verified drug test per Part 40 within 1 business day of making any changes in the reported results. Now SAPs, they do need to report the initial assessment date that it was completed by the close of business day following the date of the initial assessment. Okay. Now, date of determination of eligibility for RTD testing, they do need to report that by end of business day following the determination that the driver has completed the RTD testing. Okay. So remember, you can't just not report these things. You do have a time limit. Okay. So, removing inaccuracies and violation information.
So, to review, there are only 3 reasons that a clearinghouse record can be amended under 382.717. So 1, a data entry error, like a wrong name, wrong CDL number, wrong test result has occurred. 2, a DUI citation, which was the basis of an actual knowledge report, did not result in a conviction. And 3, an employer reporting either a failure to appear refusal or actual knowledge violation did not comply with the respective reporting requirements. Within 45 days of receiving a complete petition, FMCSA will inform the driver in writing via email or letter of its decision to retain, remove, or correct the information in the database and provide the basis for the decision. So an example of denied petitions are drivers were arguing that they had not refused based on their versions of the facts. A driver must provide evidence, notice of suspension, to support the claim that information recorded in the driver's clearinghouse record is inaccurate. If the driver fails to provide sufficient evidence, his or her petition will be closed with no further action taken. A driver may request an expedited review of the inaccuracy if the inaccuracy is currently preventing him or her from performing his or her job duties. FMCSA will respond to expedited reviews within 14 days. Note that the driver must provide evidence in order to request an expedited review. Oh, sorry. Okay, never mind. Thought I saw some chats. All right. So removing the inaccurate violation information, you will send an email to Clearinghouse at .gov with the following information. So in the subject line, you will have Part 10 Privacy Act Review. You will then have your CDL CLP holder's name, state of issuance, your CDL CLP number, an email address and phone number used for the Clearinghouse account, your violation record ID, an explanation detailing the correction and reasons for the record should be corrected. The email body must include the following statement: I declare or certify or verify or state under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. And please include any documentary evidence.
So yeah, there were some questions in the chat. However, we kind of answered them in that last slide. And a couple of you are still asking. Yes, that does need to be in there. When you are giving an official statement to the government, you do need to certify that you are true and correct underneath penalty of perjury of law. We're gonna take a small break here. Give me 1 second. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, everyone. We were getting a safety call, so thank you for your patience here. So when we're talking about query plans, okay, you do have two different options, okay. Now for our high volume carrier, when we're talking about high volume, we're talking about a carrier that has multiple drivers and are hiring multiple drivers on a daily or bi-daily basis. The unlimited query plan may end up being a better purchase option for you. This is recommended for high volume users. Now, for the other users, the more common carriers of what who we're actually addressing, we are talking about individual query plans. Okay. Now, a query plan is a flat rate of $1.25 per limited and full query. This covers both for $1.25. Now you need to select how many queries that you're going to purchase, and also keep in mind when we're talking about this, it's not something that a CTPA should be charging you for $1.25 for your queries. Okay, their query charges may be entirely different. However, an employer is the only person that can purchase queries. Okay, the CTPA is not allowed to purchase any query plans. Now, this may change in the future, but as it stands right now, do not give out your credit card information to purchase queries, because you're probably not actually purchasing queries, okay? This has a lot to do with going into fraud and things of that nature, so please keep that in mind, okay? Now, when we're talking about some common issues, I know I kind of skipped over the last slide pretty quickly here, but there are some issues that common issues that arise inside of the clearinghouse. And a lot of these issues and registration issues have to do with incorrect roles being assigned, okay? So if you cannot designate a CTPA or cannot purchase a query plan, you're probably registered as a CTPA, okay? Or you're probably registered as a driver, because a driver cannot purchase query plans. You have to make sure that your role is correct during your registration process. Now, if you can't invite assistants, you're probably registered as an assistant or not as an administrator. Okay. Now, if you cannot, or I'm sorry, if you're unable to conduct query purchase plans, we already discussed this. You're probably registered as a driver. Okay. Just keep this in mind, that sometimes you don't have to hire somebody for some of these more common issues, right? So now you may have these issues, but how do you fix them, right? How do you update your role after you've already registered? Now, owner-operators, check to see if you're under your employer or your driver role in the clearinghouse. This is going to be at the top of the web page. You can select it from there. And then also, when you go to your dashboard, you're going to go down to My Profile, and you can actually set and update your CTPA information through there, but you have to be set as a DACH, okay, in your FMCSA portal. Okay, so here we're kind of approaching the final stretch here, you guys, okay? So right here, we're talking about the Clearinghouse Rule 2 and CDL downgrades, okay? Now that we've covered the initial Clearinghouse rules, registration process, and queries process, what the Clearinghouse is and who must use it, now let's take a look at the final rule that covers the state Clearinghouse requirements for non-issuance and downgrading of CDLs. Now, when we're talking about the Clearinghouse Rule 2, the SDLAs are the only ones that can not issue a license or downgrade a CDL. Okay. Now, this rule was published October 7th, 2021. The effective date of this has already passed, is November 8th, 2021. Now, here's the important part. Implementation date is going to be November 18th, 2024. Now, this does not mean that the SDLA is not going to downgrade you if you are not registered, okay? They can use their own discretion at this point in time. However, in the future, in the very near future, they are going to make it implemented and mandatory, okay? So not only do you want to register, but you want to make sure that your status is current, correct, and that you are not prohibited as a driver. So non-issuance, okay? An SDLA must query the clearinghouse prior to issuing, renewing, transferring, or upgrading a CDL or CDLP, okay? Once again, in order for them to get that query, you have to be registered. And in order to be registered, you have to go through this process as a driver and as a student driver. Now, an SDLA may deny a a CDL transition or a non-issuance is what the technical term, if the clearinghouse query shows that a driver is prohibited. Okay. Now the FMCSA will notify the SDLA when a driver completes the RTD requirements and is no longer prohibited. If the FMCSA removes a violation erroneously entered into the clearinghouse, the SDLA will also be notified, and the SDLA must reinstate the CDL driving privileges. An SDLA to expunge the driving record accordingly has to happen from the SDLA. Okay, that cannot be done from the FMCSA. So basically, they're the final rule. Now, you guys, we've given you a lot of information. However, we're going to give you our references to where we found this information. You guys, we always encourage people their self-education. And obviously, you guys are here in this webinar as part of your self-education, your self-awareness, which is kudos to you. But however, we're a firm believer of read it for yourself or it didn't happen. Okay, so here are some of the references that we've used. Okay, so we also used the clearinghouse portal accounts. We used how to conduct full queries. You guys, we will give you guys this list of references so you guys can go to each of these links and read this information for yourselves. However, this is our own interpretation of our experience and what we read and what we know of the clearinghouse. Okay. Now, summary. Lydia, take it away.
Okay, so again, just to summarize the whole webinar here. So Clearinghouse, again, is an online database where employers, FMCSA, SDLAs, and state law enforcement can view a CDL and CDLP holders' drug and alcohol violations only after a query has been conducted and that has been recorded by SAPs, MROs, SDLAs, and CTPAs. So drivers cannot operate a CMV unless they have consented to a pre-employment query that shows they are not prohibited, aka eligible. All clearinghouse users will need to create a login.gov account in order to access the database. Employers and owner-operators must have clearinghouse user roles designated in their FMCSA portal. Owner-operators and student drivers must designate a CTPA to report violations and RTD information. CTPAs and assistants can be authorized to do one or more of the following on behalf of an employer, which is to report violations, RTD information, and conduct queries. Information that needs to be reported to the clearinghouse is alcohol test with a 0.04% or higher, alcohol/drug test refusals, negative results from tests, including RTD tests, completion of follow-up testing, actual knowledge like the driver was using alcohol while on duty or using a controlled substance. The employer will receive a notification of new violation that was recorded in the clearinghouse for the query driver within 30 days of conducting a pre-employment full query, not through an annual limited query. Violations can be reported if a driver is not registered and will be retained for 5 years or until follow-up testing plan is successfully completed, whichever is later. When a prospective employee has not completed a follow-up testing plan prescribed by the SAP, the subsequent new employer must obtain the follow-up test plan from the previous employer and report the date the follow-up testing plan was completed. Canadian and Mexican drivers conducting operations in the United States are subject to the clearinghouse requirements and must report drug and alcohol program violations.
So, again, thank you for joining. We are going to give you guys portal access, or safety portal access, okay, for those who attended the webinar today. Okay. Now, remember, in the webinar, in the portal, you're going to only have limited functions because, we don't have any work requests for you at this time. So once you submit a work request, then you'll start to see more information and more things pop up. Here at 915 Logistics, we do have the experience, we have the expertise to help you with all of your safety needs. Please keep that in mind. Of course, we're going to do a shameless pitch here. We can help you get started with our a la carte services or even our managing packages. However, if everyone here knows us, we are more for education and letting you guys do it on your own and helping you guys get to that point than we are for managing it ourselves. We would rather teach you, share the knowledge. Knowledge is not proprietary. We don't own the rights to being knowledgeable in these facets. We are here to share that knowledge. So we don't own those rights. So just keep that in mind. We do have a few questions. Not everyone needs a CTPA. There are only certain aspects of this where you need a CTPA. Now, however, does that mean that you don't have to have one? No. Once again, it boils down to certain scenarios and certain instances where you need a CTPA. Okay. So another question that came up here, kind of a good one, but I think we already kind of covered it, right? If your driver is prohibited, no, he can't do short runs. Okay, it's a good one, but we already kind of talked about it. If your driver is showing prohibited, or he hasn't conducted given consent for the query, he cannot be out on the road. That's just a simple fact. Just so that you guys know, we do have or had a client who had his drivers out on the road against our advice and our advision, and they were prohibited. And they're just going to go do a quick run. Well, it turns out that they're doing these checks roadside as well. Law enforcement are making it a priority. So you don't want to be caught doing something, then don't do it. That is something that we have a huge philosophy here. If you don't want to be caught red-handed with your hand in the cookie jar, don't put your hand in the cookie jar when you're not supposed to be in the cookie jar. Okay? So we kind of live by that philosophy. Okay? Now, obviously, your own business practice and your own procedures are going to be to you. However, we do not advise that driver being out on the road. Another good question. Actually, this one is for you, Lydia. I think this is a question for you. So, can you guys help me with driver registration? Is that something that you think we could do?
Yes, we can. We can help you with driver registration. We can even help you with your employer registration. Again, like our with our a la carte items and managing packages, we can pretty much help you with almost anything. Just again, when you log into the portal, you can submit a work request. The only thing is we can't just register your driver without your driver being there. Like, again, we can't have, their password. Like, they have to be there with us, and we'll walk them through with registering.
Yeah. So, thank you guys. I'm gonna kind of wrap this up here because I know we kind of went over a little bit. We're about an hour and 25 minutes right now. Thank you guys. We did record the podcast. I see a lot of you guys already kind of dipping out, but we did record the podcast. We did record this webinar. So thank you guys for being patient with us. Thank you guys for signing your consents for the recording. We do appreciate it. You guys feel free to reach out to us, and we're here for you with whatever your needs. Thank you.
Thank you.